The restaurant was too elegant for forgiveness. Ethan's voice cracked between the silverware and the silence as he told his parents he couldn't afford another semester. Margaret's glass of wine froze halfway to her lips. Charles didn't look up from his phone. Their faces didn't show shock, only embarrassment. The waiter hovered, pretending not to hear. Ethan's throat burned with humiliation. He had thought they'd help, or at least care. Instead, Margaret's words sliced through him. "We don't raise failures." Charles nodded once, like signing a business deal. Ethan's heart stopped. The family name had just disowned him. The city lights outside blurred into streaks. He walked out without touching his meal, their laughter following him like ghosts. What would you do if the people who gave you life treated you like a mistake? Outside, the rain greeted him like punishment. Ethan stood on the curb, clutching the crumpled paper, replaying every word they said. The city glowed cold and uncaring. Cars hissing past like whispers of pity. He thought of the child version of himself who dreamed of earning their pride. That boy was gone now. Something else began to form in his silence. A vow, not to prove them wrong, but to never need them again. He walked for hours, not knowing where to go. The rain washed away his anger, leaving only the ache of disbelief. The city's noise felt like mockery. The laughter from bars, the hum of expensive cars. Every window showed a life warmer than his. He realized then no one was coming to save him. He'd have to build his own world, brick by painful brick. At a bus stop, Ethan sat beside a homeless man who offered him half a sandwich without asking questions. The kindness stung more than cruelty. For the first time that night, Ethan smiled. A broken, grateful smile. Not everyone had turned their back on him. Maybe that was the lesson he needed before beginning again. Hours later, Ethan reached the edge of the city. The skyline towered above him like a dare. He pulled the invoice from his pocket one last time, tore it in half and let the wind carry it away. The night whispered a silent promise. He would never beg again. The first night in his car was the hardest. The city outside buzzed with life while Ethan sat inside silence. The leather seats were cold, and his laptop rested on his knees, like the last piece of hope he owned. Every sound of laughter beyond the windshield felt like a reminder of what he'd lost. He typed anyway. Lines of code no one asked for, building something even he didn't understand yet. The screen's glow reflected off his eyes, steady, focused. He whispered to himself, "I'll never let them win." The words sounded fragile, but they carried the weight of survival. What if the pain wasn't punishment, but preparation? Days bled into nights. He showered at gas stations, coded at public Wi-Fi spots, and lived off vending machine meals. No one noticed him. Maybe that was mercy. He started sketching designs for a digital platform that could make life easier for people like him. People invisible to the world. Hope flickered again, faint but alive. One afternoon, as he worked on his laptop outside a library, a stranger stopped. She was curious, not judgmental. "You built that?" she asked, pointing at his screen. Her name was Nora Lynn. She didn't flinch when he admitted he lived in his car. Instead, she smiled. "Then we start there," she said. That was the moment the story of his revenge quietly began. Two outcasts building an empire from scraps. They work in coffee shops until closing, in his car until dawn. She believed in him before success did. She had her own ghosts. A career stolen by a corporate superior who called her replaceable. They shared silence like allies, turning pain into fuel. Together they became a quiet storm waiting to rise. Months later, their prototype worked. The platform loaded without crashing, a first victory. Ethan leaned back, eyes burning from sleepless nights. Nora whispered, "Told you we'd make it." He smiled for the first time in a long time. Outside, the sunrise broke over the city like a promise. He didn't know it yet, But that tiny code would grow into a 32 million storm. Success didn't arrive in a roar, it whispered. Their app launched quietly one night, and within weeks, downloads multiplied. Ethan barely slept. Every notification sound felt like proof that he was no longer invisible. He and Nora worked from a cramped apartment that smelled of coffee and ambition. The world didn't see the exhaustion, the bleeding fingertips, or the fear of failure stalking every breath. They only saw numbers rising, and behind every number, Ethan saw his parents' faces fading into the past. Maybe revenge didn't need fire. Maybe it just needed patience. The first investor call came from a voice that once ignored him. Ethan didn't forget that tone, condescending, now trembling with curiosity. They called him a visionary. The word didn't fill him with pride, only irony. He had been the same man when he was poor. Only the world's eyes had changed. The company grew faster than he imagined. What started as survival became empire. Journalists called him the face of modern innovation. Every headline was a quiet echo of the night he was disowned. He didn't crave their apology anymore. He wanted them to watch. His success wasn't about money. It was proof that pain could build palaces. The first corporate gala they attended felt unreal. Cameras flashed, reporters called his name, and he forced himself to smile. The boy who once begged for help was now the man everyone wanted to know. Yet as he stood under chandeliers brighter than his old nightmares, he felt the emptiness behind the applause. Success was loud, but healing was still quiet. Later that night, when the applause faded, Ethan stood on the rooftop alone. The city stretched beneath him, a mirror of light and silence. He thought of the boy who once slept in a car and the parents who threw him away. For the first time, he didn't want to prove anything. He just wanted to build something so strong that no one could ever take it from him again. His empire wasn't revenge. It was rebirth. 10 years can turn pride into desperation. Ethan's company had become a household name. His parents' empire had rotted beneath debt and scandal. He first saw their names again in a news alert. Vale Holdings declares bankruptcy. He read it twice, then laughed once quietly. The same hands that threw him away now reached for help. He felt no triumph, only stillness. Revenge didn't rush, it waited. When Margaret called and said, "We'd love to see you," he answered, "Of course." But his voice no longer sounded like their son's. It sounded like consequence. When Margaret's voice reached him again, it carried a tremor he'd never heard before. She spoke of family, of forgiveness, of how proud we always were. The lies rolled off like perfume, pleasant, suffocating. He agreed to meet them at his headquarters, not out of mercy, but curiosity. He wanted to see how regret looked in their eyes. They arrived the next morning, dressed like ghosts of wealth. Expensive clothes that couldn't hide fear. Charles extended his hand. Ethan shook it as one would a stranger's. Margaret's eyes darted around the lobby, unable to believe her son owned what she once mocked him for dreaming. The marble floor echoed their steps, and each echo sounded like memory returning to collect its debt. They sat across from him at a polished table that could have been a mirror. Margaret spoke first, weaving apologies between compliments, her smile trembling at the edges. Charles stayed quiet, eyes calculating. Ethan listened, his face a perfect mask. Inside, he measured every pause, every nervous breath. The same people who once laughed at his brokenness now rehearsed humility. It was almost artful. When the meeting ended, Ethan stood and smiled politely. "I'll think about it," he said. The same phrase his father once used to dismiss him. They didn't realize those 4 words were his verdict. As they left, Nora appeared in the doorway, her eyes meeting his. "You're not done with them," she said quietly. He looked past her to the skyline beyond the glass. "No," he whispered. "This is just the invitation." The gala was Ethan's masterpiece. An empire displayed like art. Reporters, investors, and politicians filled the glass atrium of Vale Innovations Tower. Every guest wore ambition like perfume, but tonight wasn't about business, it was about memory. At the center of the room, under a halo of white light, Ethan stood beside Nora, greeting people with the calm of a man who had nothing left to prove. When Margaret and Charles entered, the room seemed to hold its breath. Cameras turned. For the first time, his parents had to look up to see him. When he took the stage, silence followed. He spoke of growth, perseverance, and gratitude. Every word was polished, but each carried an undertone only he understood. "Sometimes," he said, "rejection is the greatest investment life can make in you." The crowd applauded. His parents smiled uncertainly. They didn't realize the speech wasn't about success. It was about survival. During dinner, Margaret tried to rekindle the illusion of family. She laughed too loudly, touched his arm as if affection could erase a decade. Charles spoke numbers, offering partnership, pretending it was mutual respect and not desperation. Ethan listened, every smile rehearsed. He had imagined this scene countless times, but the satisfaction he expected wasn't there. Vengeance, it seemed, felt more like silence than victory. Victory. Later, as guests mingled, Nora approached. "They want your mercy," she said. "They'll call it partnership, but it's survival." Ethan looked at her, eyes steady. "Then let's give them a taste of what survival feels like." She didn't ask what he meant. She already knew. Together they moved toward his parents, calm as predators who no longer needed to hunt. He stopped a few feet from them. "You taught me everything about business," he said softly. "Especially how to walk away from liabilities." Their smiles faltered. The nearby guests pretended not to listen, but everyone heard. Margaret's fingers tightened around her glass. Charles's jaw set in disbelief. Ethan turned to Nora and nodded toward the stage. "Announce the acquisition," he said. The crowd gasped as she declared that Vale Innovations had officially absorbed Vale Holdings. Every asset, every name. The family that disowned him now belonged to him. The night after the gala, Ethan couldn't sleep. The city outside his penthouse looked smaller now, trapped beneath fog and glass. He poured a drink and watched the news replay his victory. Visionary CEO acquires failing empire. The headlines praised him, but every word echoed hollow. He had wanted them to suffer, and they did. So why did it feel like something inside him had died too? The boy who once dreamed under streetlights was gone. In his place stood a man who finally won, and wasn't sure it mattered. Nora found him still awake. "You did it," she said softly. He didn't answer. She stepped closer. "But it doesn't feel like victory, does it?" He looked at her. His partner, his witness, the only one who saw the man beneath the armor. "They taught me cruelty," he whispered, "and I learned it too well." Nora's eyes filled with quiet strength. "Then unlearn it," she said. "That's how you win." Her words landed heavier than any applause. The next morning, Margaret called again. Her voice was broken now, stripped of pride. She begged him to spare what little was left of their legacy. Her house, her name, her illusion of control. Ethan listened in silence. Every sob reminded him of his own past nights, begging the universe for a chance. The symmetry was cruel. "You taught me business," he said finally. "And business has rules." He ended the call. His reflection in the black phone screen looked unfamiliar. Later that day, Charles appeared uninvited. He looked smaller now, shoulders bent beneath years of ego turned to dust. "Your mother's sick," he said. "She can't take this." Ethan stood still, eyes unflinching. "Neither could I," he replied. The older man lowered his head. For the first time, Ethan saw him not as the man who cast him out, but as someone who had built a cage of pride and called it strength. Maybe vengeance was only another cage. That evening, Ethan returned to the rooftop where his empire began. The wind carried the sounds of the city, the same city that once ignored him. He thought of Nora's words, of his parents' silence, of how easily power could become poison. The lights below looked like sparks waiting for meaning. He whispered into the night, "I forgive you." It was for the boy who once needed to hear it. The final meeting was held in silence. Ethan invited them to his office one last time, not to negotiate, but to end the story. Margaret arrived first, pale, wrapped in a coat too fine for the fear she carried. Charles followed, clutching a folder of ruined papers. They sat across from their son, unable to speak. He didn't smile this time. "I wanted you to see what you built," Ethan said quietly, "and what you destroyed." Margaret's eyes filled with tears that came too late. "We were wrong," she whispered. "No," he replied, voice steady. "You were honest about who you were. I just finally learned who I am." Ethan slid a document across the table. It wasn't another contract. It was a deed. "The house," he said. "It's yours again, paid in full." They looked at him, confused. "No conditions," he continued. "But it's not a gift, it's closure." Margaret reached for his hand, but he pulled it back gently. "You can't buy forgiveness," he said. "You can only live with it." When they left, Nora entered quietly. She didn't ask what he had done. She already knew. "You finally let them go," she said. Ethan nodded. "And maybe now I can start." He looked at the skyline, the same one that had witnessed his fall, rise, and redemption. The world had changed, but the truth hadn't. Power fades, forgiveness endures. Nora smiled faintly. "Then let's build something new," she said. That evening, Ethan visited the old restaurant, the place where it all began. The same chandeliers, the same tables, only the ghosts had changed. He sat alone in the corner where he was once disowned and whispered to the memory of that night, "Thank you." The waiter asked if he was waiting for someone. Ethan smiled. "No," he said. "They've already come and gone." At dawn, Ethan stood once more on his rooftop, the city stirring awake beneath him. The wind carried no weight this time. Only peace. He thought of the boy who slept in his car, the man who built an empire, and the son who forgave. He didn't need applause or revenge anymore. He just needed silence, the kind that means you've survived your own story. As the sun broke over the skyline, Ethan smiled. The past had finally lost its power.